Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive. I love our deep dives because we get to really kind of dig into a topic.
Yeah.
And today's topic is really interesting. It's all about Stoicism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you heard much about the Stoics?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been fascinated by them for quite a while now.
Yeah.
I find that their wisdom is really timeless
Yeah.
and surprisingly applicable to modern life.
It's interesting you say that because that's actually kind of our mission today. We're going to be looking at this article called The Chief Task in Life: Insights from Stoic Philosophy.
Okay.
And we're going to try to kind of suss out like how can we use this ancient wisdom
Right.
in our own lives today.
Mm.
And the article really focuses on this idea from Epictetus
Mm-hmm.
about controlling what you can control
Yeah.
and maybe letting go of the things that you can't.
That's a big one.
So where do we even begin with this? Like,
Yeah.
what is this idea of control that the Stoics were so focused on?
Well, I think a good place to start is with this fundamental distinction that they made
Okay.
between things that we can control and things that we can't.
Okay.
And they were very clear about this. They said, look, there are things that are within our power
Mhm.
and there are things that are outside of our power. And it's really important to understand the difference.
So what kinds of things did they say were in our control?
Well, for them, it was largely our inner world.
Okay.
So things like our thoughts, our beliefs, our judgments, our
Mhm.
desires, our aversions. These are the things that we have direct control over.
So basically how we react to the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's our domain. The outside world, on the other hand, that's a different story. Our bodies, our possessions, our reputation,
Oh, yeah.
other people's opinions, the weather even.
Mhm.
These are all things that are ultimately outside of our direct control.
And so their point was that if we're trying to control these things that we can't control,
Yeah.
it's going to lead to a lot of like frustration and suffering.
Exactly. It's a recipe for unhappiness.
Yeah.
Because you're essentially trying to force the universe to bend to your will.
Right.
And the universe doesn't really care about your will.
I think I've had that experience a few
I
times.
think we all have.
But so then what do we do? Like, how do we actually live this out?
Yeah.
Because it seems like, life is full of things that we can't control.
Well, that's where this idea of the chief task comes in.
Okay.
And this was really central to Epictetus's philosophy. He said that the chief task in life is to distinguish between what is within our power
Mhm.
and what is not, and then to focus our energy on the
Yes.
things that we can actually control.
The chief task in life. I mean, it sounds kind of intense, right?
It does have a certain gravity to it.
But I kind of like it too. It's like a mission, you know?
Yeah, it's a worthy pursuit, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. And so how does this tie into like the whole idea of Stoic virtue? Because I know the Stoics talked a lot about virtue.
Well, the Stoics believed that virtue is the ultimate good,
Yeah.
and that virtue is what leads to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And they identified 4 core virtues:
Okay.
wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw these virtues as being intimately connected
Okay.
to this idea of control.
So
Because when you focus on what you can control,
mm-hmm.
you're essentially exercising these virtues.
Yep.
For example, let's take courage.
Okay.
Courage isn't just about, facing danger. It's about facing any kind of challenge with a clear mind and a steady heart. And that's
Right.
much easier to do when you're not getting caught up
Mm-hmm.
in trying to control things that you can't.
Can you give me like a concrete example?
Sure. Let's say you're giving a presentation at work
Okay.
and you're feeling really nervous. Now, you can't control whether or not the audience is going to like your presentation,
Right.
but you can control how well you prepare. You can control how clearly you articulate your ideas. You can control your demeanor and your body language.
Right.
So by focusing on those things, you're essentially exercising courage
Yes, that makes sense.
because you're facing the challenge. And you're doing the best you can with what you have control over.
Okay. I see how that applies to courage.
Yeah.
What about like some of the other virtues?
We'll take justice, for example.
Okay.
Justice is about acting fairly and treating others with respect.
Mm.
And we can only really do that if we're not constantly trying to manipulate or control them.
Right.
Because if we're trying to control other people,
Mm-hmm.
then we're not really respecting their autonomy, and we're not really treating them as equals.
So it's more about focusing on like our own actions
Exactly.
and how we treat other people
Right.
rather than trying to like force them to do what we want them to do.
That's exact.
Okay, that's really interesting. So how do we actually put this into practice? Like how do we make this chief task a part of our daily lives?
Well, the Stoics had a number of practices that they recommended.
Oh, okay.
But one of the most important was daily reflection.
Okay.
And this could take many forms, but essentially it involved taking some time each day to reflect on your thoughts and actions, and to ask yourself some key questions.
Like what kinds of questions?
Well, questions like what were the challenges that I faced today, and how did I respond to them? Did I get caught up in trying to control things that I couldn't control?
Right.
Or did I focus my energy on what I could actually influence? What were my intentions behind my actions? Were they virtuous intentions? Or were they driven by fear or greed or anger?
So it's kind of like checking in with yourself.
Exactly. It's about becoming more aware of your patterns of thought and behavior, and then making adjustments as needed.
And so by doing this kind of reflection regularly, the Stoics believed that we could actually train ourselves
Yes.
to become more virtuous and more resilient.
Exactly. It's like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets.
That's a good analogy. So we've been talking a lot about like everyday challenges,
Right.
work presentations, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the article also talks about some pretty extreme examples like imprisonment and exile. And it makes the point that even in those really difficult situations,
Right.
we still have control over our inner world.
That's the remarkable thing about this philosophy. It's not about denying the reality of our circumstances. It's about recognizing that even in the most dire of situations, we still have a choice. We still have the power to choose how we respond internally.
I think that's so powerful.
It is.
And it's also kind of like humbling in a way.
Yeah.
Because it reminds us that even when everything else is taken away from us, we still have this inner freedom.
Exactly. So let's bring it back to like our listeners. What are some practical takeaways that they can apply in their own lives?
I think the first takeaway is simply to become more aware of this distinction between what you can control and what you can't. And to start paying attention to where you're focusing your energy. Are you spending a lot of time worrying about things that you can't actually change?
Or are you focusing on taking action?
On the things that you can influence.
Right.
The second takeaway is to start practicing this idea of daily reflection.
Okay.
Take a few minutes each day to check in with yourself, to ask yourself those key Stoic questions. And to see how you're doing. And the third takeaway I would say is to be patient with yourself.
Okay.
This is not something that you learn overnight.
Right.
It's a lifelong practice.
Yeah.
And it takes time and effort to really master it.
So don't get discouraged if you don't see results immediately.
We just keep practicing. And eventually you will start to see the benefits.
Absolutely.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too.
So to kind of recap for our listeners, the Stoics believed that the key to a good life is to focus on what we can control.
Right.
Which is primarily our own thoughts and actions. And to let go of the things that we can't control, like other people's opinions or the circumstances we find ourselves in. And they believed that by doing this, we can cultivate virtue, build resilience, and find true freedom and peace.
And I think that's a message that's as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago.
Absolutely. So for all of our listeners out there, I want to leave you with this question.
Okay.
What if, instead of trying to change the world around you, you focused on mastering your inner world? How might that change your experience of life? That's something to really think about.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Stoicism. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Until then.